So it's been a week today since the new governor of Nigeria's central bank, Tosin, outlined his new vision of new monetary policy and economic outlook at the CBN bankers' dinner here in Lagos. On Tuesday, ProShare, a Nigerian leading finance and markets information research firm, published a 10-page analyst note on Cardoso's CBN speech. Tosin is a senior economist at ProShare and is live here with me on the show to discuss the ProShare's analyst report. It's great having you here on the show tonight. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
What do you make of the new look monetary policy announcement by the new central bank governor last Friday dinner time?
Okay, thank you for having me once again. As you said, there are two sides to it, actually. The first point, of course, for us was that the CBN is returning back to its basics in terms of monetary policy and, of course, the price stability, as well as the moderating the interest rate, as well as maximizing growth. Those are the core, core mandate of the CBN, and so it's returning back to that. But on the other hand, it's moving away, just shifting away from the quasi-fiscal intervention, as it were. But you remember that we said the CBN is returning because, come to think of it, it has been the target of the CBN in the first place that they target inflation, because right from the SLS administration or the leadership of the CBN, they've actually started that inflation targeting, because then the leadership of the CBN actually did a macro economic model, and they find out that there is an inflection point in the relationship between inflation and GDP. So I think somewhere around 6 to 12% was the range that was established with that model, and as such, the SLL leadership of the CBN fixed that inflation target at the range of at the 6 to 9% range. And so that has been in place. But what happened is that the previous leadership of the CBN, of course, wasn't committed to it. But what we have with the Cardoso-led CBN now is that they are returning to that focus. And of course, we hope, there are concerns to it, but we hope that they will also be committed to it.
How does the central bank get committed to inflation targeting? What will the central bank do?
Really, it's not so difficult, really, because, as I said, I listed the mandate of the CBN. And so what you do is just to be committed to pick your fight. Anyway, let me call it that way, because in the broad scheme of things, there's a trilemma. There's an economic trilemma. When we say economic trilemma, there is inflation, then there is interest rates, and there is growth. Growth, you want to talk about the employment as well as it. But the point is that if you want to fight inflation, then you need to raise interest rates. But raising interest rates could actually hurt growth. And in that instance, and we see what we see with the previous administration is that they keep pursuing that growth. And of course, through those interventions, we have the Anchors Borrower Scheme pursuing that, and at the same time, pumping more money into the system. Yet, they'll say they're fighting inflation. So that's why it seems convoluted. But if a CBN sit down the way we feel that the Cardoso-led CBN wants to do, then they target inflation, as it were, and I think it will be better for them.
Well, we'll see how that goes, because again, I'm sure the new administration will still be doing ways and means. Of course, the National Assembly has expanded the threshold from 5 to 15%. That means we're likely going to have more printing than we had previously, if that decides to happen, if that window is knocked on by the executive branch. But that is remain to be seen. We haven't seen that happen. But that's again, if you look at inflation focus, do you think the central bank can shoot without missing right now when it comes to inflation targeting? I was seen the last few years by central banks around the world, from the US Fed to everyone else, looks like chasing inflation seems to be a mirage.
Yes. As I said, it didn't start with this current CBN. It has been in place, but the current administration, what they want to do, I think they can be committed to it. As I said, it's a fight that you need to actually pick. But the problem we'll have is that inflation targeting within our context, there are concerns to it in the sense that inflation targeting is actually premised on accuracy of data and the timeliness of data. But even before that, let me say that some moderate level of inflation is actually consistent with growth. But the problem lies there is that when it reaches a certain threshold, then beyond those limits, inflation begins to actually threaten growth. And on the other hand also, it doesn't provide the market stability that is needed. And so people or businesses, even policymakers, cannot establish to say, cannot make investment decisions. And so it becomes a threat to the system. And so that's why the CBN is focused on saying, okay, let's establish a range. Although they've not given that, but we understand from the speech that they said they will provide guidance on that in the coming days. So, but as I said, the concern is actually that this must be premised on the accurate data. And so that needs to be established. But if that is established, definitely we'll see the CBN.
I think I also spoke about the accuracy of data, that they're going to mainstream data within the central bank to be sure they got their fingers on that. But I'm sure you folks at ProShare wouldn't miss the bank recapitalization proposition. How should I think that should be pursued?
Okay,
Wasn't that your report?
Yes, it's actually captured in our report. But I think there are two sides to it. And the argument for recapitalization is actually based on two factors. And one of it is the devaluation of FX. And you agree with me, the last time we did that recapitalization, that was in 2004, 2005. As at that period, we were talking about the exchange rate somewhere around 130. And then so the CBN raised the issued capital of the share capital of bank then from 2 billion to 25 billion naira. And when you convert that to dollar within that period, we're talking about around $200 million. But at the current exchange rate now, we're talking about 830 as at yesterday. That same value has decreased to around $30 million. So that's actually the argument that I've been making.
That's a reality.
Of course, that's a reality. And on the other hand, as I said, the second factor was the fact that government has an aspiration. And so the CBN is saying, let's position bank to service that aspiration of
$1 trillion.
$1 trillion economy. So there are those arguments on the table. But of course, on the other hand, one of those things we argue is the fact that it's a macroeconomic issue. And so why do we subject bank to be the culprit in this instance? Because supposing there has been an appreciation, will you say the bank should actually, draw down on their capitalization? So that's why we're saying it's really dicey within that, and we need to approach it with caution. That's on one hand for the argument, on the other hand for the argument for banks needing to service the $1 trillion economy. We must say that even in the CBN speech, he alluded to the fact that the short to medium term stress test of the bank suggests that they are strong enough. And of course, you agree with me in terms of the capital adequacy, banks are strong, liquidity, they are there, asset quality.
Over the last 10 years.
Of course, profitability, strong, they are there. So it means that banks are actually growing in tandem with the economy. So why do we want to set them up to where the economy is actually not at the same time? And
so put the $1 trillion economy forecast on their shoulders.
On their shoulder, and so you're going to create
rather than
a rush.
using the macro.
Yeah, you may create a rush in the capital market, and of course, whole bank going at the same time, and that could jack up their valuation even much more than their fair value. So that's one of those things we say.
A little bit of a problem we had back in 2004, 2005.
So that's why we're saying let's approach it with caution. But if the CBN actually wants to go ahead with it, well, we also think that again we may need to approach it in a differentiated method. When I mean that, I mean rather than using the the regional, national, and international authorization classification,
which we've been using before,
which we've been using before, we can use this tier classification, and I think that's why ProShare is so particular about the tier classification of banks. So if we know that the tier 1 banks are strong enough and we want to place a higher capitalization on them, go ahead, they'll find a way around it. But the lower banks, we need to have a different classification. The tier 2, tier 3, we need to have a different capitalization for them.
Rather than one size fits all.
Exactly.
Rather than one size fits all. Yeah, that could hurt the lower banks and hurt the system in a manner. But let's finish up this conversation around the FX market. I wouldn't let you go without touching the FX. And it's because it's the life wire of everything. How do we enthrone the liberal FX market? Did you pick anything out of that in Cardoso's speech, and how did you put it in your report?
Yes, I think from the report, he actually said that the CBN is committed to improve liquidity, FX liquidity, and to clear the backlog as well as, stabilize the naira to dollar exchange rate. And ProShare, we are of the opinion, or we have the school that actually believe that at the current rate, it seems to suggest that the market is currently freely floating, because when you consider the fluctuation we are seeing in the FX market at the official rate, sometimes you can be talking about 780, and at the same time as yesterday, I think around 830. So there is that large fluctuation that suggests that if they are intervening, there will be that moderation. Unlike the parallel market rate where we had that moderation around 1,160, there has been that moderation there. So, but any which way, and when you also consider the reserve, it also shows that there has not been that significant movement in our reserve to show that they are actually intervening in the market. And of course, when you want to know, and I think from his speech, it seems that they are committed to actually establishing a guideline that will guide the market. But on the other hand, of the flip side, when you consider the four sources of FX supply to the country, they are not so doing well. Talk about the oil production. I favor the NUPRC data. Our oil production is still below 1.5. Total production, when you put 1.5, but crude oil production, which is the OPEC own, is actually less than around 1.35. So
you add condensate and all of that.
Yeah, 1.5. So oil production, diaspora remittance also suffering. I think it's always around 220. Yeah, just a little over $20 billion annually. Trade balance is the same thing. It's not so doing well. And of course, investment too. Foreign capital importation is also very so the four sources seems to suggest that really we need maybe a miracle from the Cardoso-led CBN.
And everyone else in the room. Except you and I. But again, we all need miracles. Thank you so much. It's a Friday evening. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much, Tosin Ige. An interesting conversation dissecting the central bank's recent policy direction. And that's Tosin Ige, senior economist at ProShare.